Sharron Davies, our silver medal swimmer at the 1980 Olympics, knows a thing or two about injustice in sport. She was infamously robbed of gold in Moscow when her drug-taking rival cheated her of glory. 4 decades on, and Sharron's own experiences have seen her bravely speak out, often on the show actually, against the likes of trans swimmer Leah Thomas, who was finally banned from competing in elite women's races this week after years of demolishing helpless female rivals. Just a couple of months ago, Sharron led the boycott against sports brand Nike when it chose trans influencer Dylan Mulvaney to model female sports bras. But in her brilliant new book, released tomorrow, Unfair Play, The Battle for Women's Sports, she warns the rise of trans extremism has been propagated by what she calls a dangerous gender industry, where institutions, corporations and famous figures partner together, all in the name of woke. So, Sharron Davies, this is an absolutely brilliant book.
Oh, thank you.
So timely, and obviously you are the perfect person to write about your experience, given how you were cheated for a very different reason back in the 80s. But talk to me about this gender industry, because I think what the issue is, it's very hard for people to speak up against it, given how powerful it is. You know, it includes these corporate giants, it includes broadcasters and media outlets, not to mention some sporting bodies.
Yeah, and that's not my area of expertise. Obviously, my area of expertise is sport and understanding all of that and the science that goes with it, you know, and the experience.
And you've always been so strong.
Yes, and the experience of the East German era, which had the same result with a slightly different way of doing it. You know, they just gave synthetic testosterone to young girls and
to
put
biological
them through,
women.
Exactly, and put them through a male puberty, which meant that they were so dominant, you know. And the thing which was different then was that was really only just East Germany working with, say, swimming, track and field and rowing. It didn't encompass all those other sports. It didn't encompass park runs or junior events or pathways or masters. I mean, you know, this is a much bigger threat to women's sport. And it's just, it's kind of a little bit about what you were talking about earlier. It's a joining of the dots. You know, the whole thing is it's definitely being masterminded somewhere and it's being funded somewhere. So I would love some journalists to do some very in-depth journalism and talk about it. But the book was predominantly about the challenges to women's sport, you know, throughout the whole of the last 100 years, really, because everybody talks about, you know, de Coubertin being this great great leader of men and women with the Olympic Games, but actually absolutely loathed women, and he didn't want women in the Olympic Games at all, and he did everything he could to keep them out. So it's talking about all of that. And
exactly, so you've fought so hard for so long for there to be these big female athletes. And don't get me wrong, there are some incredible stars. You know, you look at the Williams sisters, for example.
Of course.
But the issue is women's sport is still under threat for loads of reasons, and that's before you allow biological males to compete.
And that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to put it all in the book so that there was a reference there, which, I mean, we did so much work on the referencing. It had to be so accurate and so careful to make sure that the science was accurate and everything, you know, was so that you could... There's 38 pages at the back of where you can go and get all of the studies and make sure that everything is correct.
Very often the issue is when you have woke folk who are backing people like Leah Thomas, they point to their own science over the hormone blockers, and they say, oh, if you bring your testosterone levels down, it's absolutely fine, you know. But you say what to those folks?
Well, we say that we know that's not true, though. You know, there is 18 studies in the world, and there's only 18 studies in the world.
And that's because you can't reverse male puberty?
You can't reverse male puberty, exactly that. So it's a bit like blowing up a balloon. You know, once you've blown that balloon up, you can't let it down. You know, it's there, that's where it is. And just stopping blowing it up any further doesn't make it any smaller, it just kind of stops. So particularly if you carry on exercising and looking after those muscles, as most athletes would do, so the 18 studies that are available to us show us categorically you can't remove male puberty. And the last one was in September of last year in Brazil, and that was one of the largest, and that was done after 14 years, and still they hadn't removed male puberty advantage. So, you know, it's... What we're asking is for our young girls to compete with a known disadvantage. And the big question is, are female athletes worthy of fair sport?
Yes.
Exactly.
But one of the most shocking and depressing things about this is, number one, the personal incoming on you. I mean, a bit like J.K. Rowling, you have been called a transphobe, you have been called a bigot, you have been called discriminatory. I mean, that's astonishing. So let's tackle that number
and a
one.
racist, you know, which I find fascinating, considering I've got mixed children, mixed race kids. You know, it's a way of closing down debate, though. I'm not even
because
sure
if they attack you, they want to scare you.
Exactly.
Is that what it's about?
Well, they want to silence you. You know, that's what it's all about. They don't want you to debate. They don't want us to talk about the science.
Yeah.
They don't want us to bring this information out and to go, well, here we are. Here's all the evidence. You know, so they don't want that. They literally just want to you know, to scare you into silence, and that's what they've been able to do very successfully for a long time. I mean, it took 7 years for any governing body actually asked a female athlete how they felt about losing their fair sport.
Well, then that's, I guess, the second point I was going to make. The way that folk like you and J.K. Rowling have been treated, unfortunately, has scared a lot of other female athletes from joining this debate. I mean, clearly there are some brilliant, brave foot soldiers. I mean, Riley Gaines, the American swimmer who lost to Leah Thomas, she's been a regular
And Amelia,
on this show.
that you've spoken to.
Absolutely. So don't get me wrong, there are some. But I just wonder, Sharron, and I know you're never someone who, you always like to uplift, you know, you don't like to bring people down, but are you sometimes frustrated to see the lack of other big-name female athletes coming out to support this sport?
I think it's the silent majority as a whole that I find disappointing. You know, I get stopped in the street all the time if we do polls, whether that's on Twitter or whether it's in a newspaper or whether it's a, you know, a Gov poll. It all comes out massively on the side of wanting fair sport.
But you never know that reading them.
Exactly, and that's what I find very frustrating. You know, is that if the silent majority believe in fair sport, then why is it not happening when so many people think that's what should be happening? So I'd like to see a little bit more help from, you know, the government. They've made some good moves this week. I would love to see the Equality Act clarified, so then that we can use sex discrimination to make sure that young girls are looked after. One of the most disheartening things I find, and particularly this time of year, I'm getting a lot of calls from mums and dads saying, you know, that their little girls come back from school sports day and the primary school has run mixed races all day and not a single little girl has won a race. So what are we teaching our 11-year-olds and our 10-year-old girls? You know, that they just can't win anything. And that's not the message we should be giving our young females.
So that's in Britain, but obviously this is an international issue, right? So don't you need global bodies, including the Olympics, you know, working together in order to protect women's sport?
Yeah, absolutely. And we have got that now with World Aquatics. Very proud that they were one of the first to do it.
They were shamed into it, though, weren't they, by Leah Thomas?
Well, Leah Thomas made a big difference, I guess. I mean, they were already in doing the process.
Okay. Well, I guess if you think they've done a good job...
Yeah, and they have. And another thing that they've done as well, they've passed a mandate to say they want to put 40% of their committee members as females. Now, that's a really big step, because when I did the Olympics in 1980, there were 4 men to every female, and there was not a single female on the Olympic committees, and we're still massively outnumbered. So, unfortunately, men run sport. So it's about getting women's voices in there and getting men to stand up for us, you know, and actually say... And if you talk to them individually, or if you talk to them at a training session, they'll go, absolutely, of course, they know. You know, they know how physiology work, how biology work, and what advantage there is there. It's just, they often say, well, it's not our fight. Well, it is your fight, because these people are males. So please speak up. Yep. And you've got daughters, sisters, you know, girlfriends. Yep.
And as we always say, doesn't happen the other way around, does it? You don't see trans men entering.
No, you never do. Well, they opt to race with the women most of the time.
Of course they do. Of course they do. Oh, my goodness. This is such a brilliant book. There it is, released tomorrow. Unfair Play, the battle for women's sport. Available in your local bookshop and online as well. Sharron Davies, so great to see you in the flesh tonight. I know, it's a treat to have you on the studio, but we'll talk to you down the line very soon, I am sure.